What's up, everyone? You guys know I love looking at older iPhones, and it's been a minute. We've been talking so much about the newer iPhones, the XS, XS Max, and the iPhone XR. And I started thinking, man, and like when I did all those comparisons with the XS and the 6S and all these other iPhones, the more I compare the iPhone 6S to other phones, the more I'm surprised by how well it still holds up. And there's a lot of things that go into it. There's a lot of reasons why the iPhone 6S still holds up, but these are personally why I think the iPhone 6S is still a very good contender in the later part of 2018 and 2019. Obviously, in like 2 months, I'm going to be doing an updated review, how I think it's going to hold up in 2019. But like I said, already did It's Still Worth It, already did an updated late review, but I kind of want to go into a little bit more detail. Those videos I kind of go like paint a huge paintbrush and kind of look at everything in a bird's eye view, but I kind of want to delve into more detail. Now, this thing is still supported, and that's a main reason why this thing is still holding up, obviously, because not only is it going to get all of iOS 12, it's going to get all of iOS 13, and quite potentially it could go up to iOS 14. There's no way to verify that. That's all assumptions. Usually when I make assumptions like that, I'm sometimes wrong. More so than not. So we'll see how it goes. I said the iPad X, whatever, was not coming, and it ended up coming. So in this case, I'm not going to say it is or not, but it could potentially go up to iOS 14, like how the iPhone 5S went up to iOS 12 and got an extra version of support. So maybe not, but we'll just kind of go. But that's a pretty big reason why this phone is still holding up. But I started looking into it a little bit further. Now, I read a lot of comments on my channels, and a lot of people leave a lot of constructive little things and honestly what they think. And a lot of people have the iPhone 6S, and even people watching this, you probably own it. And a lot of people think that the Apple A9 chip had a lot to do with the speed and the improvements overall. And in my opinion, it could be the case. I don't know too much about the Apple A9 chip. I know that the HomePod has the Apple A8 chip, which is the same thing in the iPhone 6. And that thing seems to be pretty powerful as well. So I don't know, like obviously the HomePod doesn't need like the Apple A100 chip in order to run, it's just like a screen and doing simple commands. But I kind of think that the reason the iPhone 6S was so revolutionary in terms of speed and everything was because of the extra gigabyte of RAM. So the iPhone 6 had 1 gigabyte of RAM. The iPhone 6S had 2 gigabytes of RAM. Now, I know I say gigabyte wrong. I'm trying to correct myself. Sometimes it sounds like I have an accent, so I have to like kind of maneuver my way through it. But the power at the time was insane. Even at this time, it's still pretty crazy. But, I want to give a little history lesson, okay? The iPhone before this, okay, which was the iPhone 6, was the best-selling iPhone ever, okay? And it kind of deserved it. It changed the design on the exterior and the exterior. God, my English is so bad. But interior-wise, the iPhone 5S and the iPhone 6, there really wasn't too much of a difference in terms of speed. And I say that then, and I say it now too. I mean, I think I've already compared both of them too, and I found that the speed, it might be a little bit faster on the iPhone 6, obviously, but it's not going to be by much. It's not like worth an upgrade in terms of the interior, what the phone can do. But in the exterior, the iPhone 6 was a pretty big upgrade. It was a completely different design. But going from the iPhone 6 to the iPhone 6S, that's where the interior changed. So we pretty much only had a different color. That's pretty much what changed on the outside, which was the rose gold color. But the inside changed dramatically. We had the 2 gigabytes of RAM. We had the Apple A9 chip, and I like I said, I think the iPhone 6S and 6S Plus were what the iPhone 6 and 6 Plus should have been, because the iPhone 6 and 6 Plus, I probably wouldn't recommend people buying those, but the 6S and 6S Plus, I think they're very strong contenders still. And at that time, I mean, the speed was pretty much unmatched. The iPhone 6S and 6S Plus were the fastest phones. And honestly, this is the craziest part. I don't know if you guys watched these videos that I did recently, but the iPhone 6S Plus actually beat the iPhone 10 and the iPhone 8 Plus in a speed comparison that I did between them when they were both on iOS 12. I think it was like 12.0.1 at the time. And I saw that the iPhone 6S Plus was faster. And it's a weird thing because I did the iPhone 6S versus iPhone 8 Plus and the iPhone 6S versus iPhone 10. And I found that the speeds were overall faster on the 8 Plus and iPhone 10, but the iPhone 6S and iPhone 6S Plus share pretty much the same exact specs in the inside. So that makes me question, why was the 6S Plus so much faster than the iPhone 6S? Because if you think about it, the phone is bigger, it has a higher resolution screen, so technically speaking, the iPhone 6S Plus should have been slower than the iPhone 6S, but that was not the case. So that was actually pretty interesting, I'm not really too sure why, and nobody's been able to answer that question, why the 6S Plus in that test was so much faster than the 8 Plus and iPhone 10. I think it was even faster than the iPhone 7 Plus, so I don't have the answers to that. Maybe someone will, but I just want to bring that to everyone's attention again. But the speed is amazing. Even for a 3-year-old device, it's unmatched in my opinion. Now, another crazy thing, and this is not so much crazy, it's kind of more, kind of behind the lines, but the fingerprint sensor was introduced with the iPhone 5S, and the iPhone 5S and the iPhone 6 both had Touch ID 1, but the iPhone 6S actually brought Touch ID 2, which is a pretty big improvement. It's definitely not as noticeable. It's not as like, oh my God, like a wow factor as maybe like something going from like Touch ID to Face ID. But Touch ID 2 was there from the iPhone 6S, the iPhone 6S Plus, the iPhone 7, and the iPhone 8 series. And that was a pretty big improvement as well. Going from a Touch ID 1 to Touch ID 2. Now, honestly, like there's really not that much of a difference, I would say, but it's just kind of like a little bit of extra like improvement. And we saw that within like a 3-year span of Touch ID 2 taking place until they removed the home button. So that's pretty cool, and I really appreciate Apple for doing that. And that was brought in with the iPhone 6s. Now, another crazy thing that was brought in with the iPhone 6s, and this is one of those things that I think is really one of the main reasons why the iPhone 6s is still holding up, is Force Touch. You know, Force Touch is one of those things recently has been a lot more controversial. I'll talk about that in a second. But everyone uses it. I use it all the time on my devices. And like I said, the most controversial part within recent times was that the iPhone XR, the iPhone that was still the same price and actually more expensive than the iPhone 6s on release date. So in 2015, the iPhone 6s cost less than the iPhone XR. The newest iPhone, the budget priced one, which isn't even a budget one, didn't even have Force Touch, which is insane, which the iPhone 6s in 2015 had it and it introduced it. And I'll be honest, you know, when I even compare like an iPhone 6 to an iPhone 6s, I kind of feel like I don't feel the interior of the phone. I can't feel the parts, but when I Force Touch on something, I feel that little premium factor, the haptic feedback that the iPhone 6s had is pretty decent. And just the thought that you can like press into a notification, get more information out of it is much better than a long press. I even compared the iPhone XR with the iPhone 6s just in my hands, and I was like, you know, I wonder which one feels better. And definitely the iPhone 6s feels a lot better in the hand when you're Force Touching than what the haptic feedback brings, and it's just kind of more immersive, I would say. And I don't know why they took it out. I mean, they definitely try to save money, but how much more expensive could it have been if they just added Force Touch in it? It's just kind of a weird situation that they were in. And I love Force Touch. Like I said, I think it makes the phone feel more premium, and it actually adds some functionality in it. Now, this next thing isn't the most important thing. I don't know what the most important thing out of the iPhone 6s was, but a main reason, in my opinion, why the iPhone 6s is still a great contender is the camera. You know, this was the first iPhone that introduced the 12 megapixel sensor, and this was the first iPhone that allowed you to shoot in 4K resolution, which is insane. Now, you can only do 4K at 30 frames per second, but there's still a lot of phones out there that only allow you to shoot 4K at 30 frames per second. So in terms of that, the iPhone 6s was ahead of the time. So in terms of that, the iPhone 6s was ahead of its time. It's not the best camera, you know, I don't think it's the best camera out there, but it's a very, very good sensor still. And since then, funny enough, every camera after this has been 12 megapixels on every single iPhone. Now, we have gotten the dual camera setups like on the iPhone XS, the 10, the 7 Plus, the 8 Plus. But for the lower models like the iPhone XR, for example, that still has a single camera on the back, which is 12 megapixels. And that's pretty insane, I would say. And this was the first phone to bring that. And, you know, I'll definitely say cameras have 100% improved since then, not only in terms of hardware, but in terms of software as well. The iPhone 8 Plus can do a lot more than the iPhone 6s can, or 6s Plus. But the step between the previous model to the next model, for example, the 6 to 6s, it was a pretty big gap, I would say. I mean, there was a huge improvements. And I feel like every single phone released then has been marginally improved in terms of insides and outside. Maybe the iPhone 10 would be the exception. I think the 7 Plus was pretty good too. But I mean, kind of bringing everything together, I think maybe the iPhone 6s was a little underrated. You know, before I owned an iPhone 6s Plus as my main phone, I had the iPhone 6 Plus, and even when the 6s Plus was released, you know, they looked the same. They didn't really change the outlook, so I just kind of assumed they were pretty much, you know, the same phone, maybe a little bit changed here and there. And I would hear people talking on Twitter and things like that, and just see like, oh, the phones are the same. This is that. It's not that much of an improvement. And I kind of believed it, and maybe at the time it wasn't that much of an improvement because I think the iPhone 6s came with iOS 9, so there wasn't really too much of like innovation going on. Apps and everything were still being developed for the 6 Plus, which didn't have the best processor at the time. So at the time, that's what I thought. And then what's crazy was, as I went further and further, and before I even upgraded to the 6s Plus, I did a lot of research. I'm like, you know what, I'm just going to pull the trigger because I didn't know if I wanted a 6s Plus or a 7 Plus. So I ended up just buying a 6s Plus. And the difference between the 6 Plus and the 6s Plus was crazy. Now, the 6s Plus and the 6s, like I said, have the same specs, but it was a huge difference. And then when I switched from a 6s Plus to a 7 Plus, you know, I didn't think it was that big of an improvement. I mean, they both felt the same, different home buttons. Obviously, the vibration motor, it wasn't an actual home button on the iPhone 7 Plus, but, you know, it wasn't like a crazy amounts of difference, I would say. And when I went from an iPhone 7 Plus to the iPhone 10 more recently, again, like I was like, you know, there's a difference for sure. I mean, it's a whole different phone, but that like excitement, that like difference I felt between the 6 Plus and the 6s Plus was pretty noticeable. And I really haven't been able to replicate that since. But I mean, that's pretty crazy how the iPhone 6s, you know, is still a very good contender. I wouldn't recommend the iPhone 6 or 6 Plus to anybody, but I'll completely recommend the iPhone 6s. And it's one of those phones that it's a very safe iPhone. It's almost like the iPhone SE. I think the SE is a little bit more safer, but as a whole, I mean, it's a very good phone. And if you have it, you can enjoy it. Like, you're really not missing out on much. You still have the headphone jack and all those things. If you want to pick up an iPhone 6s, I will leave a link in the description below so you can pick one up. I always try to find like the lowest prices and everything so you guys can pick it up. So I'll leave that link down below. But honestly, I just wish Apple would keep pushing boundaries like they used to. You know, it just seems like they're pretty stagnant. You know, they're in a really weird place right now. Their stock price has gone down quite a bit, but I just really hope they're able to turn that around and, you know, create a product that's pretty crazy. And I guess time will tell, but I guess we'll see what happens from here. But that is pretty much it. If you guys have any questions or anything like that, leave it down in the comment section below. Hit that like button, that'll mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. Every single subscriber we get really does count, so it'll mean so much if you guys could hit that. Also, check out the other links down in the description as well. My Twitter, my Instagram, my second channel that is also linked down below. I'd really appreciate if you guys could check that out. But more importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out, one.